Last time in my personal bullet journal, I introduced you to Buffy, the namesake of this journal, moving into the back half of 2021. But now it is time for us to pick our fierce fictional female for July, so let's go. Hey y'all, welcome back to Dots and Beyond. If you are new here, my name is Beth, and this pink journal is Buffy. She is my bullet journal for July through December of 2021. If you missed that setup video, I will link it for you in the cards above, but when we last left Buffy, I had gotten a little heavy-handed with the gold watercolor here on this moon, and it actually had bled through to the page on the other side, and I promised that we were going to find a way to fix that issue. I could have fixed these bleed through spots in a couple of ways. I could have used a white paint pen and gone over them. I could have glued these two pages together, but instead I decided to incorporate it into my design. As the title suggests, our fierce fictional female for July is Uhura from the Star Trek series. But one of the reasons I did this series was so that I could learn how to draw people better, and I have been struggling with this one. So we're going to go back to my bullet journal for the first half of the year and take a look at January. That setup is still my favorite of this series, and it was Okoye from Black Panther, and I just wanted you to see that I did this setup completely with markers and pens. But one of the super fierce things about Okoye is that she has got this gorgeous bald head that is just amazing, and it was easy for me to draw her or recreate drawings of her without having to worry about a hairline or how that looked. So while that setup in January was fairly easy for me to do, I did want to show you what it's like when I am struggling with a character. And I have struggled with more than this one, but this is the first one I'm going to show you all of my test pages on the screen. And my splash page for July is Uhura sitting at her communications grid. And this was sort of the first test that I did, and it's terrible. This is all markers like Okoye was, and it simply wasn't working for me. So I switched to a brown marker for Uhura, and it was better, but I still wasn't feeling it like I really wanted it to be. So then I transitioned to a watercolor test, and this is the one that I have landed on, and I do like the way that it has come out in the long run. But again, I just wanted you to see that sometimes it takes a lot of practice and a lot of tests before you get something that you're willing to work with. I know that sometimes we look at each other's work on Instagram or YouTube and we're just amazed by one another's skill, and there are some amazing artists out there, and I simply am not one of them. Everything that I do does take a lot of effort, and I wanted that to be seen on camera. Art, any kind of art, takes practice, and that's what this journal is for me. Bullet journaling or artistic bullet journaling is a creative outlet for me, and that is the reason I do it, so that I can improve my skills while I'm also being productive. But now it is time to officially meet Nyota Uhura, who first appeared on television screens on September 6, 1966 in the first episode of Star Trek. She was first portrayed by the exquisite Nichelle Nichols, who is such a trailblazer for African American women on screen that I felt like I could not do this series of fierce fictional females without her. For the black parts of this setup, I'm going to forego that Tombow black brush pen and use the Sakura Pigma Micron. And the reason for that is that the black brush pen is water soluble, and I'm going to be using watercolor on here, and the Sakura will not bleed while the Tombow would start to run when the water hit it. And again, I am going to be using watercolors for this setup. This is the cheapest palette of watercolors I could probably find at Michael's. I'm not a big watercolor person. I don't use them a lot, but I did have this one on standby in case I ever decided to use watercolor in my journal. Good watercolors are definitely an investment, but as a dabbler, I just didn't feel like I needed to have those on hand. With switching to the watercolors, I did make some stylistic changes to her outfit. Instead of it being a red or a bright marker red, I do make it a little more on the pink red side. And then I made her go-go boots, those great go-go boots from the 60s, gold instead of black like they are in the show. And then I chose to put her cuff a little bit of gold, her earring a little bit of gold, and then her Star Trek insignia in gold as well. And because Uhura is the communications officer of the Starship Enterprise, I wanted to have her seated at her console and then a graphic of her projecting to all of the planets in the universe. And those planets are how I'm going to incorporate the little bleed through there on the left from the Buffy setup. Using my Helix circle template and a Uniball gold gel pen, I am going to draw a number of different sized planets all over this page, and then we are going to connect them together with various circular arcs just to make it look like it is sort of a galaxy that is all connected to the singular console of Uhura. Now, Nichelle Nichols herself has joked that Uhura was nothing more than a glorified telephone operator in space, but her impact on the industry really should not be underestimated. Even Whoopi Goldberg has mentioned that seeing Uhura on screen as a child is what inspired her to become an actress, and of course she would famously go on to become a recurring character on Star Trek The Next Generation as Guinan, and that's one of those stories that I love that is just a full circle moment. Speaking of circles, as I fill in these planets with some horizontal and vertical lines, I can tell you that circles are going to be a running motif throughout this setup, and my Helix circle maker definitely comes in handy for that purpose. I will fill in these planets with black, but now that that first coat of watercolor is dry, I do want to top it off with another coat just to darken things up a little. Once I start coloring in these planets, you'll definitely be able to see how that bleed through cover up took place as I incorporated it into the design. I did consider making the planets different colors, but ultimately decided I wanted the only real color on the page to be the character of Uhura herself. A little trivia about the character's name: Uhura does come from Uhuru, which means liberty or freedom in Swahili. And then her first name of Nyota was actually not conceived until 1982, and it was by an author who was doing a Star Trek tie-in book, and he actually got the name of Nyota approved by both Gene Roddenberry and Nichelle Nichols herself. And Nyota also comes from a Swahili word, this time meaning star. When I did the pencil sketch connecting all of these planets, I did use a compass to get that arc onto the page, but here, instead of getting the compass back out, I am just freehanding those arcs with the pen. Once the planets were on the page, I did want to get in a simple July header, and I just chose to do this in a very light cursive. Once the July header is in place, this page will be done and Uhura will be able to open all frequencies.
Hailing frequencies open, sir.
I hope this splash page for July is helpful in showing you how to incorporate a mistake into your design, as well as realizing that sometimes it takes not one, not two, but sometimes 3 or 4 iterations of a design to get it right. Next up is my calendar page, and I have chosen to go with a very minimal mini calendar and just write out my important dates and other locations. And as I started sketching Uhura on this page, I realized I forgot her Starfleet insignia on her uniform on the splash page and had to flip back and fix that pretty quickly. Quick reminder that I will link all of the products that I am using in the description box below, and also in that description box will be a link to my Pinterest board for my Fierce Fictional Female Challenge. I will link you directly to the Uhura Pinterest board, and that is where you will see the artwork from whence I drew inspiration for this setup. Here I'm using the same watercolors to get the watercolor onto this sketch, and I did start blending that in this small palette that I have that honestly I picked up from the Dollar Tree just because the color was too heavy coming directly off the paint palette. And again, I'm finishing Uhura off with those touches of metallic gold just to give her a little sass. Next to Uhura, I am writing Focus with 4 spots below it, as well as Growth with 4 spots below it. And then on the right, I have Highlights and Events. Highlights will be things like birthdays, and then events, of course, will be event specific. And I'm just putting in a mini calendar so that I can see the days of the month. And then to bring my circle theme back into this page, I drew this mini Starship Enterprise flying through the galaxy, which is punctuated by all of these little dots that I will connect together. And to connect these dots, I am just going to use the outside edge of this Helix circle template itself. And there is my calendar and goals page for July 2021. This next spread is definitely going to put my circle motif to the test, and this is going to be my health tracker for July. And this was directly inspired by Dan Knowlton, who goes by the handle Pacific Notation on Instagram. Definitely follow him from the link below. But he wrote a blog post on the Bullet Journal official page on intentional habit tracking, and so I am going to simplify one of his circular habit trackers. It takes a lot of effort to do, but let's get started. I figured if ever there was a month for me to duplicate this, then this was the month to do it. But of course, I've also got to get Uhura on the page, and here she is holding her communicator and looking just a little bit sassy. As we are coloring in Uhura, let me tell you how this tracker is going to work. So essentially there's going to be a circle for each day, and then there is another circle around the perimeter of that circle for each of the categories that I want to track for the month. So here in the bottom I am putting a key so that I don't even forget what each of my categories are, and those categories are going to be meditation, cardio, yoga, and water intake, and I will color in each one of those circles for the days that I do those things. And then in the center I just have a line where I can put the date. So here I'm showing one of those mini circles and how that's going to look, and then I'm going to fill out the rest of this page off camera. Here I am finishing up the last of those circles, and then the final step will be to come along and date them 1 through 31. And that will be my Uhura Galaxy inspired health tracker for July. This kind of a tracker is a first for me, but again, you should definitely go check out Dan on Instagram at Pacific Notation because his spreads are just chef's kiss. Next up will be the sleep tracker for July, as well as my mood tracker, and my sleep tracker is definitely function over form. It is a very simple chart that I use in conjunction with a sleep app. So down the left side of the page, I will have the days of the month. Across the top of the page, I will have the hours from 8 p.m. to 11 a.m. And then 3 columns, 1 for hours of sleep, 1 for quality of sleep, and 1 for blood pressure if I choose to check it on that day. And then for the mood tracker, I will just track my moods from best to worst on this very simplified communicator from Star Trek, the old school flip communicator that so closely resembles our old flip phones. In the photographs that I pulled of those old Star Trek communicators, the lid was perforated or full of tiny little holes, and so what I did was just choose to make those a little bit larger so that I could put the days of the month in those holes. And for this month, I'm going to keep the mood color tracking fairly simple. With my best mood, I will leave a space white and then go from a lighter gray to a dark gray to a black for worsening mood. And then I added Uhura to the page with a profile picture just here to the left of the communicator. For consistency, I will use the same watercolor method to paint her color in and again top her off with the gold accents. And even though this is a 2D drawing, I felt like it was looking a little flat, so I colored in the edges of this communicator with a little bit of gray. I do move this piece of scrap paper between the pages when I think the paint might still be a little bit wet, but we're moving on to the final setup for July, and that is my first weekly. And this weekly is going to be a big departure for me because I am doing away with a rolling weekly entirely. Ultimately, it is something that is vital to me in my work journal and how I use my work journal, but I discovered that I'm not using it in my personal journal as much, and it's just taking up space on the page. When I do the flip through of my journal for the first half of 21, you'll definitely be able to see that internal conflict play out on the page, and that'll be coming up in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that video. Without the rolling weekly on the page, I do have more page for the daily, so I am going the simple box route, doing 6 boxes, one each through Monday through Friday, and then a joint box for the weekend. Up in the top right corner, I'm keeping a mini calendar, which has kind of become non-negotiable for me. I love having it, as well as 3 smaller trackers just for the week, and those are for medications. And then I am bringing back the miniature Starship Enterprise flying through the galaxy that I used on the calendar page. Only this time it's going to look as though it was fired from Uhura's phaser. If you want to see how the other weeklies for July turn out, make sure you do follow me on Instagram. My handle there is at dotsandbeyond, and you will find that linked in the description box below as well. And if you have not officially joined the Dots and Beyond family, please consider hitting that subscribe button below. I post new videos on bullet journaling, mental health, and project planning every Friday. If less paint and more function is more your bullet journaling style, please check out the video I posted last week on the reboot of my work journal, as that one will definitely be more minimalistic moving forward. And there is the first weekly for July 2021. I think this is going to work okay for me. I didn't have the rolling weekly in April during my Gilmore Girls setup, and it seemed to be okay. It took some adjustment, but we're going to give it a go. And now let's flip back to the beginning and do a quick flip through of this setup.
Would you look at that?
Thank you so much for joining me as we celebrated Uhura as my fierce fictional female for July. And if you have missed any of the other fierce fictional female videos, I will definitely link that playlist in the description box below. This calendar is definitely going to be a deviation from me since I normally use a traditional block calendar or a linear calendar. Since Star Trek inspired so much of our modern technology, today's question of the day is, what was your first cell phone? Are you old enough to have had a flip phone like I did, or did you start off with a modern iPhone? Let me know down in the comments below. From whenever and wherever you are today, if no one has told you, you too are fierce. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye. Here are a couple more videos I think you might enjoy.